I used to think I was a good Christian. I went to church, said my prayers, and lived a comfortable life as a marketing executive in Seattle, but it took dying to realize how shallow my faith really was. When I crossed over to the other side, Jesus showed me visions of the future that left me shaken to my core. The mark of the beast isn't what we've been told. It's far more deceptive and dangerous than anyone realizes. Before my near-death experience, I thought I had it all figured out. I was Astrid Langworth, a successful marketing executive in Seattle with a corner office and a view of the Space Needle. Every Sunday, I'd put on my best outfit and head to church, Bible in hand. I'd sing the hymns, nod along to the sermon, and drop my tithe in the collection plate. I volunteered at the annual Christmas Bazaar and even led a small group for young professionals. On the surface, I was the picture of a good Christian woman, but looking back, I realize how empty it all was. My faith was as shallow as a puddle in the Seattle rain. I went through the motions, checking off the boxes of what I thought a Christian should do, but my heart wasn't in it. During the work week, my mind was consumed with client meetings and marketing strategies. I rarely thought about God or my spiritual life outside of Sunday mornings. I remember sitting in church one day, surrounded by familiar faces and feeling completely alone. The pastor was talking about having a personal relationship with Jesus, but I realized I had no idea what that actually meant. I knew all the right words to say and the proper way to act, but there was no real connection. This disconnect isn't unique to me. So many of us in modern society fall into the trap of lukewarm faith. We identify as Christians, we show up to church, but we don't engage in a truly transformative relationship with God. It's comfortable, it's socially acceptable, but it's not the deep, life-changing faith that Jesus calls us to. As the months went by, I started to feel a growing unease. Something was missing, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I threw myself into my work, thinking maybe the next big project or promotion would fill the void, but no matter how successful I became in my career, that nagging emptiness remained. Little did I know that God was about to shake me out of my spiritual slumber in the most dramatic way possible. Looking back, I can see how He was preparing me for what was to come. That sense of dissatisfaction, that feeling that there had to be more to faith than what I was experiencing, it was all leading up to a moment that would change everything. As I drove to work that fateful Tuesday morning, I had no idea that my comfortable life was about to be turned upside down. The rain was coming down in sheets, typical Seattle weather, but there was nothing typical about what was about to happen. The last thing I remember seeing was a flash of red light. In that moment, I had no idea that I was about to embark on a journey beyond the veil of death itself. What I encountered there would shake the foundations of my faith and reveal truths about our world that I never could have imagined. It was a typical Tuesday morning in Seattle. The rain was coming down hard, drumming against my windshield as I navigated the slick roads. I was headed to an important client meeting, my mind buzzing with marketing strategies and sales projections. Looking back, it seems almost silly how focused I was on work, completely oblivious to how dramatically my life was about to change. As I approached a busy intersection, I remember feeling a surge of frustration at the traffic. I was running late, and every red light felt like a personal affront. I tapped my fingers impatiently on the steering wheel, willing the light to turn green. When it finally did, I pressed down on the gas pedal, eager to make up for lost time. That's when it happened. Out of nowhere, I saw a pair of headlights cutting through the rain, heading straight for me. Time seemed to slow down. I heard the screech of tires on wet pavement, felt my hands clenching the steering wheel. Then came the impact, a deafening crash of metal on metal. The world spun around me, a blur of rain and shattered glass. In those final moments of consciousness, I remember a strange sense of calm washing over me. The chaos of the accident faded away, replaced by an overwhelming feeling of peace. I saw a bright light, warm and inviting, growing larger and brighter until it enveloped me completely. What happened next is difficult to put into words. I found myself outside of my body, looking down at the accident scene below. I could see paramedics working frantically over my broken body, hear the wail of sirens in the distance. But I felt no pain, no fear, only a profound sense of peace and curiosity about what was happening to me. I later learned that I was clinically dead for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. The doctors told me it was a miracle I survived at all. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was that during those precious minutes, I experienced something that would change me forever. As the light grew brighter, I felt myself being drawn towards it. I heard the most beautiful music, unlike anything I'd ever heard on earth. And then, emerging from the light, I saw Him. Jesus, radiating love and compassion. As he approached me, I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same. As Jesus approached, time seemed to stand still. But before I tell you what he revealed, let me take you back to the moment I realized I was no longer bound by earthly pain or fear. What I witnessed next would challenge everything I believed about life, death, and the nature of reality itself. In an instant, the excruciating agony from the car crash vanished. I felt lighter than air, as if a great weight had been lifted from my soul. I found myself floating above the accident scene, watching with perfect clarity as paramedics worked frantically on my broken body below. It was surreal, like watching a movie of my own life unfolding beneath me. The contrast between the chaos on the ground and the profound peace I felt was striking. While sirens wailed and people shouted, I experienced a calmness I'd never known before. It was as if I'd stepped out of time itself, observing everything with a detached curiosity. Then I saw it, the light. But calling it simply light doesn't do it justice. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen on Earth. This light was alive, pulsing with love, knowledge, and purpose. It drew me in, not just with its brightness, but with a sense of warmth and welcome that felt like coming home after a long journey. As I moved closer to the light, I began to hear music. But this wasn't just any music, it was the most beautiful sound I'd ever experienced. Thousands upon thousands of voices sang in perfect harmony, using languages both earthly and divine. The music seemed to wrap around me, adding to the overwhelming sense of peace and love. Many people who've had near-death experiences report similar elements: the out-of-body sensation, the tunnel of light, feelings of peace and love. But nothing could have prepared me for the intensity and reality of what I was experiencing. This wasn't a dream or a hallucination, it felt more real than anything I'd ever known in my physical life. As the light grew brighter and the music swelled, I sensed a presence approaching. The love and compassion radiating from this being was so powerful it took my breath away, if I'd still had breath to take. And then I saw him. Jesus, emerging from the light with arms outstretched. In that moment, I felt completely known and completely loved. All the masks I wore in life, all the personas I'd created to please others or protect myself, they all fell away. For the first time, I stood bare before the creator of the universe, and I was accepted fully and unconditionally. As Jesus drew near, I knew he was about to speak. The words he would share with me in the next moments would shake me to my core and forever change my understanding of our world and what's to come. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to stand face to face with Jesus? As he approached, I felt a presence so powerful, so loving, that it defied description, but what he was about to reveal would challenge everything I thought I knew about our future. Jesus stood before me, more real and present than anything I had ever experienced. His eyes were filled with compassion, and his smile radiated a warmth that melted away all my fears. The love emanating from him was overwhelming, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made me feel completely safe and accepted. As I gazed at him in awe, Jesus spoke. His voice was gentle yet filled with authority. "Astrid," he said, "what I'm about to show you is of utmost importance. The world needs to know these truths." His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I sensed the gravity of what was to come. But it wasn't just his words that communicated with me. I felt his thoughts and emotions flowing into my mind and heart. It was as if our spirits were connected, allowing for a depth of understanding that went far beyond what words alone could convey. This spirit-to-spirit communication was so profound, so intimate, that I felt truly known for the first time in my life. In that moment, I understood what it meant to be fully known and fully loved. All my flaws, my doubts, my mistakes, Jesus saw them all, and he loved me completely. This unconditional acceptance was transformative. I felt layers of insecurity and self-doubt falling away, replaced by a sense of peace and purpose I had never known before. As our connection deepened, I sensed that Jesus was preparing me for something big. There was an urgency in his presence, a feeling that what he was about to reveal was not just for me, but for all of humanity. My curiosity grew, mixed with a touch of apprehension. What truths were so important that Jesus himself would appear to share them? Then, with a gentle nod, Jesus began to show me visions of the future. The scenes unfolded before me like a vivid, living tapestry. I saw glimpses of technological advancements, societal changes, and spiritual battles yet to come. But one image stood out among the rest, a mark seemingly harmless at first, but with far-reaching consequences that made my heart race. As the first vision of the mark's implementation began to take shape, I realized that the comfortable faith I once knew was about to be challenged in ways I never imagined. Jesus was about to reveal truths that would shake the foundations of my understanding and set me on a new path of purpose and urgency. The scene before me was both familiar and utterly foreign. People were eagerly lining up, but for what? Jesus' expression grew somber as he showed me a future where convenience comes at an unimaginable cost. I watched in amazement as people willingly accepted small technological implants into their bodies. At first, it seemed like a harmless innovation. The mark, as Jesus called it, was presented as a solution to so many of our modern problems. Identity theft, solved. Financial fraud, a thing of the past. It promised security, convenience, and connection in ways I'd never imagined. But as the vision unfolded, I felt a growing sense of unease. What started as a voluntary choice began to shift. I saw government employees being required to have the mark as a condition of their jobs. Then it spread to other sectors. Before long, it seemed impossible to function in society without it. Jesus showed me scenes of everyday life transformed by the mark. People buying groceries with a simple wave of their hand, children being tracked by their parents for safety, medical records instantly accessible in emergencies. It all looked so beneficial, so progressive. But with each example, I felt the weight of Jesus' sorrow. I thought of the warnings in Revelation about the mark of the beast, but this didn't look like the evil system I'd always imagined. There were no dramatic announcements, no obvious signs of a totalitarian regime. Instead, it came wrapped in promises of peace, security, and innovation. What shocked me most was seeing devout Christians I recognized accepting the mark. These were people who knew their Bibles, who loved Jesus. How could they be deceived? Jesus explained that the mark wouldn't require denying him outright. Instead, it represented a subtle choice, trusting in human systems rather than in God's provision. As the vision continued, I began to understand the true nature of the deception. The mark wasn't just a physical implant. It was a spiritual gateway slowly eroding people's ability to perceive God's truth. With each passing day, those who accepted it found their hearts hardening, their spiritual discernment fading. Jesus looked at me with eyes full of love and urgency. I knew he was about to reveal even more about how this mark would be implemented. The weight of what I'd seen already was almost too much to bear, but I steeled myself for what was to come. The world needed to know the truth, no matter how difficult it might be to hear. As I braced myself, Jesus began to unveil a chilling roadmap. Not of sudden chaos, but of carefully orchestrated deception. There are 5 stages, he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, and each one will make it harder for people to recognize the truth. Jesus showed me how the mark would first be introduced as a solution to identity theft and financial fraud. I saw people eagerly embracing this new technology, relieved to finally have a foolproof way to protect their personal information and finances. It seemed so practical, so necessary in our digital age. But as I watched, I felt a deep unease growing in my heart. The second stage built seamlessly on the first. The mark was promoted as a way to keep children and the elderly safe. I saw parents tracking their kids' locations in real time, breathing sighs of relief. Elderly people with memory issues were quickly found when they wandered off. It all looked so benevolent, so caring. But with each new benefit, I sensed the trap closing in a little tighter. As the third stage unfolded, I was shocked to see how the mark was presented as a solution to human trafficking and illegal immigration. Jesus showed me how it would be framed as a moral imperative. Who could argue against protecting the vulnerable and securing borders? The pressure to conform, to be seen as a good person, grew intense. With each stage, I understood why Jesus had called this a process of deception. Good intentions were paving the way for something deeply sinister. People weren't being forced to accept evil. They were being led to embrace it willingly, step by step, for all the right reasons. The tension built as Jesus revealed the 4th stage, where the mark became essential for everyday life. I saw people unable to buy food, access healthcare, or hold jobs without it. The choice to reject it meant facing extreme hardship and isolation, but it was the final stage that left me truly shaken. Jesus showed me respected religious leaders endorsing the mark, arguing that it couldn't possibly be the mark of the beast since it didn't require denying Christ. I watched in horror as even devout believers were swayed by these trusted voices. As the vision faded, I turned to Jesus with tears in my eyes. "How can anyone resist this?" I asked. His expression was one of deep compassion as he prepared to explain the true spiritual nature of accepting the mark and why no earthly benefit could ever be worth the eternal cost. Jesus' compassionate gaze held mine as he began to reveal a truth so profound. It shook me to my very core. What he showed me next about the mark wasn't just shocking, it was soul-shattering. Could any earthly convenience truly be worth such an unimaginable price? My child, Jesus said softly, his voice filled with sorrow, accepting the mark doesn't just change someone's physical body, it fundamentally alters their spiritual nature. He showed me how the mark acted like a barrier, severing a person's connection to God. It was as if a thick, impenetrable wall suddenly appeared between the soul and its creator. I saw people going about their daily lives, using the mark for everything from buying groceries to accessing their homes. On the surface, they seemed happier, more secure. But as I looked deeper, I saw a growing emptiness inside them. The convenience came at a terrible cost. Their ability to feel God's presence was fading away. Jesus explained that this spiritual numbing was gradual but irreversible. With each passing day, those who accepted the mark found their hearts hardening. They became less able to recognize truth, less capable of feeling genuine love or compassion. It reminded me of the biblical warnings about the unforgivable sin, a state where a person becomes so spiritually callous that repentance is no longer possible. I watched in horror as people I recognized, friends, family members, even respected religious leaders, slowly lost their spiritual sensitivity. They still went through the motions of faith, but the light in their eyes had dimmed. It was like watching someone slowly die from the inside out. This is why the decision is so critical, Jesus said, his eyes filled with tears. Once someone accepts the mark, there's no going back. No amount of regret can undo what's been done. The weight of this truth was almost unbearable. I thought of all the people who might be tempted by the mark's promises of security and convenience. How could they understand the true cost? Jesus looked at me intently. "Remember this always," he said. "No earthly benefit, no matter how enticing, is worth losing one's soul. The pain of living without the mark is temporary. The consequences of accepting it are eternal." As the vision faded, I felt overwhelmed by the gravity of what I'd learned. But Jesus wasn't finished. His expression softened, and I sensed he was about to show me something that would bring hope in the face of this daunting future. Just when I thought the weight of what I'd learned might crush me, Jesus revealed a startling truth. Those who refuse the mark won't just survive, they'll thrive. But the way he showed me defied everything I thought I knew about security and abundance. Could it really be this counterintuitive? Jesus looked at me with eyes full of compassion and said, "My children must prepare now, not with fear, but with wisdom and love. They must build communities, strengthen their faith, and learn to live differently than the world." As he spoke, I saw visions of believers coming together, supporting each other in ways I never imagined. I watched as people learned to grow their own food, preserve it, and share with their neighbors. They developed skills in basic medical care and natural remedies. Some worked on creating alternative communication systems to stay connected when other networks failed. But more than just practical skills, I saw them diving deep into scripture, memorizing passages, and building unshakable faith through times of testing. Jesus showed me how difficult life would become for those who refused the mark. Simple tasks like buying groceries or accessing healthcare became major challenges. But then he revealed something amazing. Just as God provided manna for the Israelites in the wilderness, I saw him miraculously meeting the needs of his faithful followers. In one vision, I watched a small community pray over a nearly empty pantry, only to find it mysteriously full the next morning. In another, I saw people with critical illnesses healed through prayer when they couldn't access hospitals. These weren't isolated incidents, they were happening all over the world. This message isn't meant to create fear, Jesus told me, but to prepare believers for what's coming. He showed me how he would provide wisdom to those who seek it, strength to those who ask for it, and provision for those who trust him. The faith of these communities grew stronger with each passing day, attracting others who were searching for hope in a darkening world. What amazed me most was the revival I saw spreading, especially among young people. They were rejecting the empty promises of technology and embracing a faith that was alive and powerful. Their boldness and love were drawing thousands to Christ, even in the face of growing persecution. As the vision faded, I felt a mix of emotions, concern for the challenges ahead, but also an overwhelming sense of hope. Jesus had shown me that even in the darkest times, his light would shine brighter than ever through those who remained faithful. Suddenly, I felt a strong pull, as if I was being drawn back to my body. I knew my time on the other side was coming to an end. but the truths I'd learned would stay with me forever. Have you ever wondered what it's like to die and come back with a divine mission? As I gasped my first breath back in the hospital room, I knew my life would never be the same. The journey that lay ahead would test my faith, transform my purpose, and reveal truths about the mark of the beast that I never could have imagined. The first thing I remember was the beeping of machines and the sterile smell of the hospital. My eyes fluttered open, and I saw worried faces hovering over me. Physically, I felt weak and disoriented, but spiritually, I was more alive than I'd ever been. The doctors called my recovery miraculous. They couldn't explain how someone who had been clinically dead for over 7 minutes could emerge without brain damage. What they didn't know was that while my body had been lying lifeless, my spirit had encountered Jesus and received revelations that would change everything. As I began to heal physically, I struggled to integrate my profound spiritual experience into my everyday life. How do you go back to normal after encountering the divine? The marketing strategies and client meetings that once consumed my thoughts now seemed trivial and empty. I found myself staring out of the window of my hospital room, my mind replaying the visions Jesus had shown me about the mark of the beast. My priorities shifted dramatically. The corner office in view of the Space Needle no longer held any appeal. Instead, I felt an urgent need to warn others about what I'd learned. I started talking to anyone who would listen: nurses, other patients, even the cafeteria staff. Some looked at me like I was crazy, but others sensed the sincerity and urgency in my words. As I recovered, I dove deep into research about near-death experiences. I learned that many people who have NDEs report increased spirituality and a desire to help others. But what I experienced went beyond that. I didn't just feel more spiritual. I felt like I had been given a specific mission. The more I shared my story, the more certain I became of my new purpose. I couldn't go back to my old life pretending nothing had changed. The truths Jesus revealed about the mark of the beast were too important to keep to myself. People needed to know the deception that was coming and how to prepare themselves spiritually. So I made a decision that shocked my family and colleagues. I left my high-paying marketing job and dedicated my life to spreading the message Jesus had given me. It wasn't an easy choice. I faced skepticism, ridicule, and financial uncertainty, but I knew in my heart that this was what I was meant to do. Now, as I stand before you sharing my story, I want you to understand that this isn't just about me. The revelations I received are for all of us. We're entering a time when our faith will be tested like never before. But there's hope if we're willing to listen to and prepare our hearts. As I reflect on my encounter with Jesus and the truths he revealed, I'm filled with a mix of awe and urgency. The mark of the beast isn't some distant, obvious threat. It's a subtle deception that will creep into our lives, promising security and convenience. But Jesus showed me the devastating spiritual consequences of accepting it. Yet even in the face of this coming darkness, there's hope. Jesus assured me that he will provide for those who remain faithful. He'll give wisdom, strength, and miraculous provision to communities of believers who resist the mark. I saw revivals breaking out, especially among young people seeking authentic faith. I can't emphasize enough how crucial it is to prepare our hearts now. We need to deepen our relationship with God, build strong faith communities, and learn to rely on him fully. The choice between temporary earthly comfort and eternal life with Christ will be ours to make. Let's choose wisely, trusting in Jesus' love and provision no matter what challenges we face.